Chief Minister Omar Abdullah, thank you so much for coming to PTI.
Pleasure.
It's almost a little surreal to be talking to you. I'll tell you why. In April, when PTI had interviewed you, you made a certain statement, I'll quote you. You had said, "I don't aspire to the office of the Chief Minister, and I most certainly do not aspire to lead a union territory. I have made it abundantly clear that in the current situation that J&K finds itself in, I'm not contesting assembly elections." But everything changed. What has changed?
Well, so much changed. Parliament elections changed some of it. The sort of pressure or the decision of my party that somebody had to lead the party into these polls. But more importantly, the delayed realization that it would be unfair to expect the people of Jammu and Kashmir to vote for an assembly that I myself am not willing to be a part of. I did not aspire to the office of Chief Minister. At no point during the campaign did I project myself as the Chief Ministerial candidate of the National Conference, even though colleagues of mine may have done. At no point in time did I ask for votes for myself as the presumptive leader of the party should we win. But what I was acutely conscious of was the need to explain to people that, look, this is not the assembly that we want. It's not the assembly that we deserve. But I believe this assembly will lead us to that goal. And in a few ways, that beginning has been made. The government, once it was formed, in the first cabinet meeting, the first order of business was to pass a resolution asking Government of India to restore J&K's statehood. That resolution with a covering letter was carried to Delhi. I personally handed it over to Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji. Subsequent to that, during the first assembly session, the Assembly of Jammu and Kashmir passed a resolution calling for the special status of Jammu and Kashmir and its constitutional guarantees to be restored. So this assembly has already done what we expected of it. Now it's for Government of India to live up to its promises.
You carried a letter to the Prime Minister imploring for full statehood to Jammu and Kashmir. How hopeful are you of getting that?
Well, my hope, my expectation is based purely on the promises and the commitments made by Government of India, by the Prime Minister, by the Home Minister, by the Defence Minister, other senior ministers, both when they have been campaigning in Jammu and Kashmir, on the floor of the House in the Parliament, and also during the legal sort of challenge to the 370 writing down. The commitment which was made on behalf of Government of India in front of the Honorable Supreme Court that statehood to Jammu and Kashmir will be restored. The Supreme Court said that it must be restored as soon as possible. Now, as soon as possible, it's been 1 year and 2 days since the judgment of the Supreme Court was issued. It came, if I'm not mistaken, on the 11th of December last year. Therefore, today it's the 13th of December. I think 1 year and 2 days is long enough for as soon as possible to materialize.
Yeah. Until the statehood is granted, you are the head of a sort of a hybrid government. So it's not a complete control over the state that you would have wished for. What is it like to be the head of a hybrid government where you're sharing power with the LG?
Well, it's a learning experience. It's very different to the government I had the opportunity of heading for 6 years. It has taken sort of a change of mindset to realize that there are simply some things that you could have done earlier that you can't do now. That said, I believe that the transition for us, the elected government, has been easier than it has for some of the others in the government. I think some of the other people who were in government before the elected government took office have found the transition a little bit more difficult to navigate.
Okay. Tell us a little bit more about how the governance works in this kind of a situation where you have got lots of files. Which one goes to the LG? Which one comes to you? How do you decide and how do you work
Well,
it out?
actually, it should be pretty clear. The Lieutenant Governor is responsible for police, security, law and order. Everything else is the responsibility of the elected government. So finance, planning, development, social welfare, all that is our responsibility. Then within the sort of division of powers, the central services, the Indian Administrative Service, Police Service, Foreign Service, but I believe surprisingly not the IRS, not the Revenue Service. They are the responsibility or the domain of the Lieutenant Governor. The J&K Administrative Services are ours. Now, on the face of it, it actually should be pretty easy to get this to work. But in reality, there have been the odd stumbling block that has popped up.
Would you like to elaborate on the stumbling blocks?
Well, it's actually work in progress, so we'll save it for a time when it gets resolved. We are also in the process of looking at the business rules so that they are clarified because they were obviously put down on paper at a time when you didn't have an elected government, and therefore there was no practical implications to what was being written. We are now in the process of having those re-examined just so that there can be clarity as to where our responsibility ends and where the responsibility of the Lieutenant Governor begins.
Right. It's still early days. It's just been a couple of months.
I think we're only just completing 2 months.
Yeah. Jammu and Kashmir, especially Kashmir, has for very long been synonymous with militancy, with terrorism. We'll keep that question for later. Apart from that, what are the main challenges that you think, or what are your priorities in governing J&K?
Well, the biggest challenge we faced is to have come in to essentially what was a vacuum. You have had no elected government in Jammu and Kashmir since 2018. So it would have been difficult to have stepped into this vacuum even as a normal state. To have stepped into this vacuum as a union territory brought its own share of challenges with it. There has been a disconnect between the administration and the population as a whole. That disconnect needed to be bridged. A connect between the government and the people needed to be established. They needed to realize that there is now a mechanism for their grievances to be heard and redressed. Financially, Jammu and Kashmir remains a difficult place to work. Our economy is not as strong as we would like it to be. The fact that this government has come in just before winter brings its own challenges with it because our electricity situation in winter becomes very precarious. And this is the time when Kashmir has peak demand for electricity. So trying to balance that obviously is an issue. And then supporting the ongoing move to ensure that Jammu and Kashmir remains peaceful. In this, I will also include the whole problem of narcotics and drugs that has taken on a much larger sort of scale than it was 10 years ago when I was last Chief Minister. So these are sort of day-to-day issues that we're grappling with.
Is there some kind of a roadmap that you have prepared for the next 100 days or?
It's an ongoing process. Obviously, the first 90 or 100 days becomes one benchmark, then the first year becomes another, and then so on and so forth. Some of the things that I talked about were part of our promises to the electorate. There were some others that were made with regard to electricity, ration and things like that, which are in the process of being rolled out.
And tourism obviously would be one of your pillars of improving the economy.
Certainly.
How is that working out?
Domestic tourism? The numbers have been healthy. Post-COVID, they have been we can get into sort of a longer discussion on how the numbers are projected and how the numbers are arrived at. I may or may not agree with the methodology, but the fact is that on the whole, the last few years in terms of tourist arrivals have been good. That said, tourism depends on a sense of security being made available to those who are visiting, and therefore ensuring that nothing untoward happens is obviously a major responsibility of ours. And policing can't happen in a vacuum. You cannot fight militancy or terror in a vacuum. You need the support of the local population. The local population is represented by the elected government, and therefore anybody who feels that you can deal with whatever remnants of militancy or terror exist on the ground in Jammu and Kashmir in isolation without involving the elected government, it's not going to happen.
Sure. The election results and the victory for National Conference, is that in a way a vindication that the Kashmiris entirely feel that they are part of India?
It's a tricky one to answer because I'm convinced that this time, because of these unique circumstances that surrounded this election, you had people coming out to vote who otherwise in their lives would never have voted in an election, probably because they don't feel part of the mainstream. Now, is that because we've turned a corner and they will now participate in every election that comes up after this? I can't say. Are there still people who have a separatist bent of mind in Kashmir? I'm sure there are. They have been there since 1947. They'll probably be there forever. But the fact is that, that notwithstanding, you had by far one of the most successful elections in recent memory. Not a single allegation on the part of voters that they were forced to come out of and vote, that any form of coercion was used. So whatever voting percentage you saw because people of their own free will came, stood in line, cast their vote and went home. That in itself, I think, is something to take some satisfaction from. Getting into this whole thing of whether now we're all nationalist or not, I think is a tricky one.
Now on Article 370, the central government is often says that the abrogation of 370 has been a precursor to bringing peace in Kashmir. That is what led to the decline in militancy. Would you agree with that? Or first of all, let's first discuss whether militancy has actually decreased or not.
Well, in the valley it has, but then it shifted focus. What declined in the valley mushroomed in Jammu. They are now in areas that were hitherto completely clear of militancy. You've had attacks in Kashmir that have been extremely worrying because they've come pretty close to the centers of our tourism. You've had an attack on the road to Sonmarg. You've had an attack in the vicinity of Gulmarg. So it's not as if we are free from problems. Now, the argument that this was all made possible because Article 370 was written down, I disagree with. This was made possible because you basically had governor's rule, central rule, and you were able to take certain steps that otherwise you might not have taken. The same BJP, when it was part of an elected government between 2015 and 2018, didn't take the steps that were taken after governor's rule was imposed. And none of those decisions required 370 to be written down or J&K to be converted into a union territory.
Article 370 and 35A was one of the biggest issues during the assembly elections, and you presented a resolution in the state assembly. But there are some opposition voices emerging which have said that National Conference has diluted its stand on these two issues.
Not diluted anything. We have called for the restoration of constitutional guarantees and special status of Jammu and Kashmir. How is this a dilution? We wanted to make sure that we didn't dilute what was already done by the Assembly. We didn't want to pigeonhole this resolution to take away from the resolution that was passed in the J&K Assembly in the year 2000. I'm actually amazed that the parties that are saying this are the ones, if you remember, on the first day of the assembly brought a piece of paper and waved it around. Our language in the resolution that we passed is stronger than the one that they tried to circulate on the first day. These same parties that are today saying we've diluted our stand, if you look at the video footage of the assembly, were the ones who were waving that piece of paper and demanding that it be passed. They are the ones who came to my room and hugged me after it was passed to tell me that what a masterstroke it had been, and how great it was that the assembly had spoken. So
in the resolution also you had said that you will be forming a team of ministers which will be holding consultations with the centre government on your demands in the resolution. So has the team been formed, is being formed, and when should we expect that?
Well, the resolution is still alive. It's all work in progress.
The NC did very well in the valley, and you had left the Jammu region for your alliance partner. Do you feel let down by the Congress in there?
वो कहते हैं ना रात गई बात गई. Could we have done with more seats? Of course we could have. Should we have had a few more? Yes. But we don't have them. Now, it's not for me to do the sort of soul searching that is required to be done to understand why that happened. That is something that the Congress needs to do. The Congress needs to look at our strike rate in this election and compare it to their strike rate and see whether there are lessons to be learned. Because the lessons you would learn from this, I believe, would be applicable to other elections as well. It's not a coincidence that allies are uncomfortable or unhappy with the way seat sharing talks take place or the way in which a campaign is managed, because what we saw in J&K seems to have been repeated in part in Jharkhand and also in Maharashtra. It's probably one of the reasons why you don't see an alliance between AAP and Congress in Delhi, even though they fought parliament elections together. And at that time they sort of gave the indicator that this was an alliance that would continue to the assembly. But it hasn't.
Is that the reason why the Congress's dismal performance in Jammu, is that the reason why they are not part of the government? You did not give them any...
Well, actually, look, share in government or ministries is essentially a product of the number of MLAs you have, which, and also the sort of portfolios you get is a reflection of that. Right. We were a part of Dr. Manmohan Singh's government in UPA too, in spite of the fact that my father was a former chief minister, a very senior politician. If you look at it, the portfolio that was given to him, it's a different matter that he made something out of it. But otherwise, new and renewable energy was not really a portfolio that you give to somebody of his stature. Right. But at that time, we were told that we only have X number of MPs and therefore that's all we get. So if that worked for us then, it works for the Congress now. The fact is that as a union territory, we are limited to having 9 ministers. With 9 ministers, including the chief minister, I was not in a position to offer the Congress more than we did offer them. So for the time being, they've made it very clear that so long as J&K remains a union territory, they'll stay out. Once statehood is restored, then that will change. So we hope that when they're done fighting in Parliament for other things, they will also sort of talk about statehood for J&K.
Sure. The Congress party has found its space shrinking all over the country, in the sense that, I mean, they did very well in the Lok Sabha elections, but then you have seen them do pretty badly in Maharashtra, and Kashmir is another example, Haryana is another example. In Delhi, they are pretty much completely sidelined. Do you think they still deserve to be the leader of India bloc?
Look, by virtue of the fact that they're the India bloc is a national alliance. Sure. By virtue of being the single largest party in parliament and also having the leader of the opposition in both the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha, the fact that they have a pan-India footprint which no other party can lay claim to. They are natural sort of leaders of an opposition movement. That said, that position has to be earned. It cannot be taken for granted. And therefore, I think the disquiet that you sense in some of the allies is because they feel that the position that has been given to the Congress is now, I mean, they're not doing enough to justify it or to earn it or to keep it. That's something the Congress might wish to consider. But otherwise, sort of a leader of the stature of Mrs. Sonia Gandhi, you don't have in any other political party, let's face it. And she does play an important part in the India bloc. She may not do much with the day-to-day running of the Congress party, but when the India bloc comes together, she does play an important leadership role.
But if the India bloc's entire raison d'etre or the argument has always been that they want to dislodge BJP from or NDA from power, and you're obviously not succeeding in doing that with this current leadership, and you have had leaders like Sharad Pawar or even Lalu Yadav saying that Mamta is a better leader. It says something about what is going on in India bloc.
Well, the fact that we don't seem to meet as often as we should. Look, our existence can't just be about 6 months before parliament elections.
Right.
Our existence has to be something more than that. The last time we met was when the Lok Sabha results had only just come out. There has been no formal or informal sort of work that has been done on for the India bloc. So that's again something that needs to be looked at. You need to have a program of regular interactions, not that you just come alive once Lok Sabha elections are announced and suddenly sort of start talking and trying to work things out. If we had a more regular process of interaction, perhaps these smaller irritants wouldn't assume larger proportion.
One of the several Achilles heels of the India bloc or the opposition has been, which BJP has constantly attacked, is the issue of dynastic politics. And they constantly bring it up. Do you think that that is...
Why is it that the BJP doesn't have a problem with dynastic politics when it's their own allies or their own colleagues? I don't need to point out the number of dynastic allies that the BJP has or has had in the past or will have in the future. So I have always maintained that the BJP doesn't have a problem with political families. They have a problem with political families that are opposed to the BJP. So you are a dynast only so long as you're in the opposition. You're corrupt so long as you're in the opposition. You are neither a dynast nor are you corrupt once you're an ally of the BJP.
Do you think the opposition in general and Congress in particular is barking up the wrong tree, focusing on EVMs?
I have no problem with you making an issue out of the EVMs, so long as you do it also when you win. The EVMs can't only be a problem when you lose the election, because they're the same EVMs. So when you get 100+ members of parliament using the same EVMs, and you celebrate that as sort of a victory for your party, you can't then a few months later turn around and say, well, actually, hang on, we don't like these EVMs because now the election results aren't going the way we would like them to. If you have problems with the EVMs, then you should be consistent in those problems. And the thing is, how can you have a problem with EVMs and then continue to fight elections? If you don't trust the machines, then you shouldn't be fighting. So you can't say, look, I don't trust the machines, but I'm going to fight, and if I win, then I'll keep quiet. But if I lose, then something's wrong with the machines. I lost. I keep reminding you. I lost in earlier in this year. I never blamed the machines. I won. It wasn't down to the machines. It's the voters. One day they vote for you, the next day they don't.
You sound suspiciously like a BJP spokesman here.
No, I'm not a BJP spokesperson. It's just that, God forbid. No, it's just that, look, what's right is right. I mean, in the car, I was talking to colleagues of mine and saying, look, contrary to what everybody else believes, I think that what's happening with this Central Vista project in Delhi is a damn good thing. I believe constructing a new parliament building was an excellent idea. We needed a new parliament building. The old one had outlived its utility. We need these new central secretariat buildings. It's a good thing they've built a purpose-built house for the vice president and the prime minister. Now that's not because I'm a BJP spokesperson. I believe that that's the right thing to have been done. Similarly, EVMs cannot just be a problem because you're losing elections.
I'm not trying to suggest anything, but your sons are becoming more politically active. They have spoken out on 370. They have written op-ed pieces in the Indian Express. I think it was in the Indian Express. What are their political plans?
Oh, that you'll have to call them here and ask them someday. Their plans will be made by them. They will decide what they want to do. It's not for me to foist my ideas on them. That said, whatever space they choose to carve out for themselves, they will have to make for themselves. Nobody is going to gift them anything on a plate. And if anything, the fact that they belong to a political family is going to make their lives a lot tougher rather than easier. But at the moment, my own sort of advice to them and something that they're sort of doing is actually focusing more on their legal careers. They're both lawyers, they're both practicing lawyers. I've told them that as sort of elected representatives or politicians, we are basically glorified daily wagers. We are here today, we'll probably not be there tomorrow. I mean, look at us, we got elected to a 6-year term in 2015 and we were turfed out of office in 2018 and we didn't come back until 2024. So you need something to fall back on. And there is a natural relationship between law and politics. And I mean, I'm tired of the number of successful lawyers who basically go from ministry to practice, depending upon how their political parties are doing. They need to work on that and the politics will follow.
So what are the pros and cons of dynastic politics? I mean, I don't like that term, but...
Well, it's a reality. I mean, at some point in time, dynasty stops being a factor. And I think after the first few elections, you're really there on your own merit. Belonging to a political family is not a lifelong ticket for success. And I don't need to point towards anybody else. I'll just talk about myself. I lost an election this year, I won one. I'm the same person, same family, same political party. In April, May, I lost a parliament election. In December, I'm sitting in front of you here as Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir. Whatever advantages accrue to you as from belonging to a political family are really right in the beginning because it helps you get your foot in the door maybe a little easier. After that, it's really what you make of it. And some of us do, some of us don't.
Just like in Bollywood?
Well, everywhere. Everywhere. I mean, actors' children, they get 1 or 2 easy breaks. If their movies don't do well, they don't come back. Sports people's children. Yes, they'll get recognized, their name will probably get them into the nets, they'll be able to get a few practice matches. But honestly, if you can't hit the ball or you can't take a wicket, nobody's going to carry you beyond a point.
Sure.
I just wanted to ask you about this. There are many political parties, especially in Kashmir, who favor talks with Pakistan, and you also in your manifesto mentioned that there have to be talks with Pakistan. But who in Pakistan? Because Pakistan is in a turmoil itself and there is no...
Who in Pakistan means what, Samir? We don't get to choose the governments of the countries, of any country, whether in our neighborhood or beyond. For all our desire, or at least Government of India's desire, that President Trump come for a second term right then, the fact is he had to sit out for 4 years and we had to do business with President Biden. Now, in Pakistan, however much you might want to poke holes, there is an elected government. It's there. There is an establishment that exists. And this is an elected government, or at least a political party with whom we've done business in the past. That said, there's no doubt that relations between the two countries are at a pretty sort of low ebb. some amount of confidence will have to be injected into this. And the responsibility for that lies more with Pakistan than with India. The fact is, India has concerns that Pakistan has not been able to do enough about. Whether it is with those who are accused of 26/11, those who are accused of terror attacks or engineering terror attacks in India, or in terms of stopping what is happening in Jammu and Kashmir right now. India's concerns need to be taken on board. A climate for a sustainable dialogue needs to be created.
How often do you discuss or confab with the Home Minister on the security situation in India, in Kashmir?
Not very often. I mean, I've met him once, had a couple of conversations, but look, I'm not given to overstepping my boundaries or responsibilities. I know that at the moment, for the time being, law and order and security is the responsibility of the Lieutenant Governor. I would hate for the Lieutenant Governor to overstep his bounds and step into my area of responsibility, and therefore I won't do it to him. That said, as I said earlier, you can't fight this situation in a vacuum. So to that extent, extending support to the police, the security forces, the army, ensuring that governance remains good so that there are no law and order disturbances, that's my responsibility, and we'll fulfill it.
In your opinion, having two power centers in such a strategically important bordering state, is it a recipe for...
Let me just say this, having two power centers anywhere is a recipe for disaster. Would you like to have two bosses to report to here in PTI? No organization works well if there are multiple power centers. Look at corporate India. You show me one successful business house that has multiple leaders. There is a reason why our sports team have one captain. You don't have two captains. The Indian cricket team doesn't have a captain for batting and a captain for fielding. You have one. Similarly, you don't have two prime ministers or two power centers in the government of India.
Yeah.
And most of India has one elected chief minister who is empowered with their cabinet to take decisions. A dual power center system is never going to work.
It didn't work in Delhi.
It's never going to work.
Yeah.
Delhi has the advantage of being a city-state. The strategic value of Delhi is a little less than J&K's is, given our borders with China and Pakistan. So no, this UT model, and plus in the 2 months that I've been Chief Minister, I have yet to come across a single example where Jammu and Kashmir has benefited out of being a union territory. Not one. There's not a single example of governance or development that has come to Jammu and Kashmir by virtue of it being a union territory.
Right. So the only way this team can have one captain is if J&K becomes a full state. It cannot remain this hybrid state. That has to happen. But if that doesn't happen, what plan do you have?
Well, clearly, I'd be foolish not to have a backup in mind in case it doesn't happen. Obviously, there's a time frame in mind as well, but you will allow me to keep that to myself for the moment, simply because I'd like to believe that the promises made to the people of Jammu and Kashmir will be kept. The fact that people came out to vote, they came out for a reason. When in the campaign you repeatedly told people that statehood will be restored to Jammu and Kashmir. You didn't say statehood will be restored if the BJP forms a government, or statehood will be restored if there is a chief minister from Jammu. There were no ifs and buts. You said Jammu and Kashmir will be back as a full state.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
So that has to be done now.
Still on the same issue, your father, Dr. Farooq Abdullah, still has probably very good relationship with the TDP. The TDP, which was at the time firmly in the opposition camp, they switched. They are now part of NDA. Would you want to use the TDP's good offices to maybe cajole, or not, I mean cajole is the wrong word, but to push the centre to give you statehood?
Well, actually, truth be told, we've got good relations, and particularly my father, cutting across political lines.
Yes.
The TDP is one ally
Yeah.
with whom he has a good equation. Nitish Kumar ji is another one. Similarly, there are other allies of the BJP with whom we've had a good understanding in the past. The fact is that at a personal level, there are a few BJP leaders also that we get along with. But let's be honest, this is a decision that two people are going to take. And I'm not sure how much of an influence any of these allies will be able to bring to those two people. Ultimately, the Prime Minister and the Home Minister are the ones who are going to have to sit down and decide that this is what has to be done and this is by when it has to be done. Either that or then it has to be mandated. The truth is, whether anybody in the BJP or the Government of India is ready to agree with me or not, Jammu and Kashmir would not have had elections if the Supreme Court had not ordered them, and ordered them with a definite time frame. The fact that these elections finished within a day of the timeline mandated by the Supreme Court tells you something, because otherwise, why didn't we have elections before this? What has changed that forced these elections to go ahead? It was simply the fact that the Supreme Court said this is your deadline and you have to fulfill it. Unfortunately, and this is a matter of great regret for us, on the statehood question, the Supreme Court was more vague than I would have liked them to be. As soon as possible is good, but it's not as good. If they had said as soon as possible for assembly elections, I wouldn't be sitting here with you today, because that as soon as possible may not have come around.
Finally, I've got two questions. Two major issues that are exercising India right now. One is the one nation, one election suggestion, or not just a suggestion, but has moved quite forward. What is your opinion on that?
Look, as a regional party, we believe that one nation, one election goes against the spirit of federalism and is actually a threat to the very existence of regional political parties. So I'd be very surprised if the National Conference comes out in any form of support for one nation, one election. That said, this is purely my own personal view. It's something that the party is yet to discuss, but when they do, they'll sort of look at all the aspects of it. It's not without reason that regional parties in the opposition, starting with Mamata Banerjee ji, have been pretty strident in their criticism of the one nation, one election idea. There are also sort of questions as to how you will actually operationalize it, given the uncertainty of the life of elected bodies, assemblies or parliaments. But I guess that's for the parliament to debate and discuss.
But as an idea, you don't see the merits of...
I'm sure there are merits. I'm sure there are merits in terms of you being able to save a little bit of money. But money is not the only criteria. If money were the only criteria, then every bit of social work that the government does would dry up. All these schemes that get parties re-elected because they announce them 4 months before elections would stop. You can't weigh everything in financial terms. And this is one of those things. But again, as a party, we are yet to form an opinion on it. And we are yet to be convinced that there are the numbers in Parliament to push this through.
Right. The other issue is the controversy surrounding the Places of Worships Act, which the Supreme Court has stayed any more move on that. What do you think is
well?
going on
I'm actually pleased and relieved that the Supreme Court has stepped in. I think there were some who felt that the Supreme Court perhaps wouldn't go far enough on this, but the fact that they have put a stop to it while they decide what has to be done is a good thing, because this is clearly designed to inflame sort of passions and to target a particular community. And that's never a good thing in this country. And I keep coming back to this point that, look, at least for now, the word secular is very much part of our constitution, unless somebody decides to take it out tomorrow. And so long as that word exists, you can't stand up in parliament, as is happening right now, and swear your blind allegiance to the constitution and then choose to ignore those words that you're not comfortable with. If the constitution says that India is secular and you swear by that constitution, then you have to do everything possible to ensure that it stays that way. And if you can't or you don't want to, then in the same way that you're going to find the numbers for one nation, one election, find the numbers and take the word out. Then we'll live with the consequences.
What keeps you awake, Omar Abdullah? Or are you one of those lucky persons who sleeps through the night without any...
Oh, no. No, I don't. You don't get to be Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir and not sit up at night wondering about things. That said, given that at the moment law and order and security is not my direct responsibility, that's at least one less thing to keep me up at night. But given that we're operating a hybrid government and things can be tricky at times, the absence of having to worry about security and law and order is more than made up for by having to worry about these things. But there's more than enough to keep me up.
I guess, so you wake up at 3 a.m. instead of being awake all night?
Yeah, I mean, once in a while. And then one of the good changes that I found between when I was last Chief Minister and now is we've moved completely to a paperless secretariat.
Okay.
So all my files come to me online. So yeah, if I'm having a sleepless night or something has woken me up, the easiest thing for me to do is just flip open my laptop, log into the secretariat. If I have files waiting for me, then I use my time. I was actually really pleased with how this system works because I went for pilgrimage recently and I was out for about 5 or 6 days. Not a single file pending on my desk. Because the system allowed me to operate my secretariat sitting in Jeddah or Makkah or Medina. I was able to log in, clear my files, work doesn't stop, which is a huge departure from how it used to be earlier. Earlier, these big black boxes would be brought in and I'd have to sit and sign and file and all the rest of it. Yeah. That's not what it is now, which there's not very many things I'm happy at having seen changed in the last few years, but this is one I would definitely tip my hat to.
Right. One final question, it's a personal question. What does it feel like? How does it feel to be back in power after so many years?
It would feel better if we were a state. It's humbling. I didn't expect this sort of response from the voters. The fact that the voters, in spite of all our doubts as to how the votes would be split, and I don't think there's any sort of observer of Kashmir who hadn't thought that the vote split would benefit the BJP. The fact that Kashmir, Rajouri, Poonch, the Chenab Valley pretty much sort of did away with any chance of a vote split is something that I salute them for. It, as I said, it leaves me humbled, but also acutely aware of just how much responsibility rests on our shoulders.
Yeah. Omar Abdullah, thank you very much for speaking to us. It was a very frank and wonderful conversation.
Thank you for having me here.
अगर आप ये वीडियो YouTube पर देख रहे हैं तो हमारे चैनल को सब्सक्राइब करें और बेल आइकन को दबाना ना भूलें। अगर आप Facebook पर ये वीडियो देख रहे हैं तो हमारे पेज को लाइक करें।